Okay, here we go. So we are on day, I think, 4 of AutoCAD, and we've had is it day 4 of AutoCAD? I think we're on day 4 of AutoCAD. We have today's lecture on AutoCAD, and what day is today? Wednesday. So we also have one more lecture. Today we're going to be learning to draw our elevations, or we're going to at least start drawing our elevations today. We'll focus mostly on that. We'll cover a couple of other concepts as well. And then on Monday, we're going to be looking at model space versus paper space. So we'll learn how to actually set up a sheet in paper space. We'll learn how to lay out our elevations and our floor plans on an actual page in AutoCAD, and we'll learn how to plot them correctly to scale. So I feel like we just started AutoCAD, and now we're almost done with AutoCAD. But all said and done, we will have probably learned about 15-20 commands, which are all really kind of the essentials of what you'll need for AutoCAD. The most important one of all, though, one that we can't really teach, though, to get good at this, is just practice. So myself included, I was pretty darn slow at AutoCAD for at least a couple years. I just wasn't using it all that much. I was using Revit a lot more, but now that I do construction documents all the time, I really do use Revit and AutoCAD on a nearly daily basis. So it just takes practice. You will get better at it. It will be slow. It will be frustrating. But that's just AutoCAD for now. You'll get better. Okay. So right now, everybody should have something that looks kind of like this. So this is my cabin floor plan from what I started last class. So we have an outer perimeter exterior wall. I got some glazing over here in each of the 2 corners. I kind of have a main living space. It's fairly simple floor plan, but main living space, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Okay. I also have a small deck and a set of stairs that lead up into the cabin. But otherwise, this is what we got, or this is what I got right here. All right. Everyone should have something fairly similar to this. And then today we're going to learn how to draw elevations. Okay. So last class I mentioned that I pushed back assignment 5 to Monday. Well, I pushed it back one more time. It's going to be due on next Wednesday, and I won't push it back again that time. The reason being is because today you should focus on probably drawing the first 2 to 3 elevations. If you can draw all 4, great. Maybe do all 4 with not an extreme amount of detail, and then use Monday to really refine it and refine your floor plan and your elevations. Okay, so I'm going to give everyone just 2 extra days to work on this. All right. But for the most part, by Monday, you should be like 80% done with your floor plans and elevations, using Monday to really refine them and add the little details, make sure all your layers are correct, so that come Wednesday, you're ready to turn in assignment 5 and you're ready to rock and roll. Okay? So that's about where we are. All right. Today, you'll be doing, I think, exercise 23. That will be due on Monday. All right, and then you'll be turning in assignment 5 on Wednesday. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. Don't forget about the extra credit too. All right, I don't talk about it much, but it is there. So lecture series, you can attend a lecture series here at DVC. You can attend a lecture series at Berkeley, CCA, Academy of Art. They all have them. You probably just have to do a little research on when they are, but most have them. DVC has them like every other semester. Brian would probably know more on whether or not they've actually done it yet. I don't think so. So you'd have to travel a little bit, but really easy. Berkeley has them all the time. Actually, my favorite ones were always the Berkeley ones, because they always were able to nab some pretty good names.
Oh, it only happened during spring semester.
Only spring at Berkeley?
No, here.
Oh, here. And Berkeley always had good ones, though. They're free. You can take BART there too, so it's easy. So that's an extra credit option for those that need a few extra points. It's the equivalent of half of an exercise, and it'll go towards, the 5 points will go towards your exercise grades. Okay, so if you missed one, that's an easy way to get those points. You also have your assignment and your exercise redo. So if you weren't happy with any of those, one particular grade for both an assignment and an exercise, you can redo it, turn it in. I don't care why. your opportunity to make those a little bit better. All right, so let's move on. So before we start actually learning to draw our elevations, I want to take a few moments to actually look at some actual elevations. We're going to look at a couple hand-drawn elevations, and we're going to look at a couple computer-generated elevations, okay? And what I want to focus on is, last class we were actually looking at, or we started talking about line weights, okay? When we're drawing elevations, there's going to be several very similar concepts to how we draw the elevations in terms of the layering, but it's good to know how you're going to start to draw your elevations so that your elevations become nice and legible, okay? We're going to still continue to focus on legibility, okay? So this is an elevation. This is a hand-drawn elevation, drawn with simple markers. They could also be, I'm guessing they're markers. I guess it could also easily be drawn with pencil. Just a little jumping back in history a little bit. So does anyone know how line weights actually got started or how they actually created them? Why don't you answer this question?
Pencil hardness.
Well, it was pencil hardness. So does anyone here have a set of drawing pencils? It probably says something like HB, 2B, 2, so on and so forth. Well, that's basically the equivalent to what line weights are these days. So architects, including my boss, he's actually drawing a complete, we're so busy right now that my boss, who's the owner of the company, is hand drawing elevations and stuff and submitting them to the building department. God bless his heart.
How do you archive those?
Oh, you scan them all and put them in the system.
Is
But
there a way to convert it into
no, people still do it.
into an AutoCAD readable?
No, I will eventually redraw them someday. But right now, this is basically essentially what he's doing for this project is he's gonna draw something kind of like this. But once upon a time when we were doing lots of hand drawings, we had these different pencils, and these different pencils had different I guess shades to them, or they had different thicknesses. So for example, one pencil would be a much darker lead than say another one. Well, that's basically what people use and still use today to create things like this and different variations of marker as well. So if we look at this elevation right here, what are some of the things that we notice? Based off of what we learned last class, what are some of those same techniques that you can see translated into this elevation? Anybody spot any of those? Yes.
The section that's getting cut off, so the hillside is in the thickest line.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about line weights, and we talked about the objects that were closer to you. Typically or the objects that were cut. If you were cutting through it, that was typically the thickest line. So in the sense of an elevation, you're not actually cutting through the building. You're actually doing a paralleled mirror projection of the face of the building, but essentially you're only cutting through the actual earth or whatever it is the building is actually sitting on. So in this instance of this elevation, you're cutting through the earth, but not through any part of the building. So the only part where the thickest line is going to be the cut of the earth. Okay, and you can see that this marker line is definitely by far the thickest of everything else in this drawing. So what else do we notice?
Windows seem to be shaded.
The windows are shaded, yes, which is nice. That gives some nice texture.
It's not drawn in perspective.
It's not drawn in perspective, exactly. This is a perfect mirrored projection. So we'll learn how to draw these today. But if we continue on the line scale or on the line weight thing, notice that when we talked about last class for floor plans, we talked about how we were cutting through the walls. Well, we're not doing that here, so we have to think about it a little bit differently. Okay, so typically your thickest line weights or your biggest line weights, as I just mentioned, the first one being the ground plane would be the thickest, but then the next thickest is going to be the next closest thing in the elevation. Okay, so when you're drawing your building today or you're drawing your house, think about what in all the different planes that you might have, what is the closest? Okay, and this example that we could see here, this is going to be the closest right here. There's a nice thick line that actually goes around the edge, around the roof, and all the way around this side. That represents kind of the first initial plane of objects that we encounter in this elevation. Notice here that we have a nice thick line around the eave of this part. That's arguably the eave and the railings up here and the stone is arguably probably the closest thing in the elevation. You can see here that the lines are pretty thick and pretty bold, and as you step back, they seem to get thinner and thinner. This part of the building over here is further set back in plan than this part, so it's going to be a lot thinner line weight. Okay, so the closest objects are going to gain your thickest line weights, and the furthest away objects are going to gain the thinner line weights. And then things like the shingles, the rock in the background, the hand railings, things, finer details like that will also get a very thin line weight. These are detail items. You don't want things like hatching. We talked about hatching last class. You don't want hatching to have really thick line weights, because then it would be really abrupt and loud when you were to plot it to your floor plan. Okay. Whereas if you look at this elevation here, you could see that the shingles and the little detail items are much thinner and a lot more faint. Okay, so let's look at another one here. All right, and let's start to analyze it in the same fashion. Okay, another hand-drawn elevation. All right, and we notice a lot of the very similar concepts. Notice that the roof edge right here at the front part of the building is a much thicker line weight than the side of the house that is further set back. Okay, so what this might look like in plan, I'm just going to kind of guess. I actually have no clue what this building looks like. But if I'm drawing an elevation like this, I'm guessing it probably is something like this. Okay, so what you're seeing, this part of the building first, which is this area, and this area back here is going to be the less fainter area, or the thinner line weighted area in the very back. Okay, so you can see that on top of line weights, you also have much more richer shadows. All right, so they're adding a lot more emphasis to that first planar area on the building elevation. Okay, does everyone kind of see how that's starting to work? Okay, so as you start to draw your elevations, you need to keep that in mind, all right? And I'll talk about some new layers that you can create today, so that when you start drawing those elevations, that starts to make sense, okay? I won't talk about all of these for too long, but you can kind of see the very similar elements, okay? This part of the house is the closest to us, so it has a little bit thicker of lines than the areas that are in the back, okay? Here's another, and here's the final building elevation that we'll use to actually discuss. Okay, notice that the eaves here in the front are a lot bolder, the lines that surround them, whereas the eaves in the back are a little bit thinner. Okay, so those line weights, even though it seems like such a subtle detail, make a huge difference in terms of legibility of your drawing. Okay, and without those, if you were to draw everything on the zero layer, I wouldn't know, as the architect or the contractor or whoever's reading these, I wouldn't be able to tell, what plane each of these things are without looking at a floor plan. When by just looking at this, I should be able to tell where a certain thing is located, in generalities. Okay, I should be able to tell that this plane is closer than this plane over here by having the correct line weights. Okay, so that's it for our little slides. Just a couple little examples of elevations that I wanted to share. All right. So jumping back over to AutoCAD, let's start to look at some of the essentials to drawing these elevations. So the first thing that I want to talk about is going to be something called an XREF. Okay, has anyone heard the term XREF in AutoCAD before? New term? Brian, one. So we got one. Okay, so let's look at an XREF. What an XREF is used for is, I'm going to give an example from my office. Typically, we have in AutoCAD, you would have a drawing file for each floor plan, each elevation that you have, and every single file, or basically every view that you have in whatever it is that you're drawing will have its own file. Well, if I want to reference something else that I've drawn in another file, you can set up an XREF. So basically, it's a link from one file to the other. So what I'm going to do is, and I'd recommend if you want to follow along with me, you can do that. All right. I have two things. I already have a couple elevations from last semester that kind of show a basic understanding of what it is that I'm going to be drawing. Okay. But right now, everybody should have this. So make sure that you have this saved on a place on your thumb drive where it will remain. Okay. Because that link, every time you open up that file, it's going to look for that link. Okay. So you want to make sure that you know where this is and it's in a place where you can find it in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. All right, and I'm going to open up a new drawing. All right, new drawing. I'm going to go ahead and click on AutoCAD. That's the template that we're going to use. And we're going to go ahead and start drawing all of our elevations on a new drawing file. Okay, so to do that, let's go ahead and save this. Let's save this as, and let's call this cabin elevations. Let's see. Fall 2017. Okay, so that's our new file. So from here, to start setting up our XREF, I'm going to type in XREF. Okay, and notice here that it pops up. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And here we're going to have our file references manager. Okay, our external references manager. All right, so if we go up here, right here, this is going to be the list of everything that we have in our drawing file. So right now we have one thing. That's just the file that we've just created. Okay, so cabin elevations. To add more of them, I can go up here to this little DWG drop-down menu. I can click on the drop-down menu and you'll see the variety of different file types that you can attach. Okay, so we're going to attach a DWG file. We're going to attach another AutoCAD file. Okay, but you can see here that you can also attach JPEGs, PNGs, PDFs. If you want to trace over maybe like a PDF that somebody gave you, you could do that. So this would be how you would attach that. Okay, so I'm going to click on attach DWG and I'm going to go find that file of the floor plan that we just created. So I'm going to go to my thumb drive. I'm going to go to today's work. Let's see. In fact, I think I maybe accidentally saved it in the wrong file. Where did I save this thing? One second. Let me just see where I saved this this floor plan. Week 13B. I accidentally saved it in the wrong. Well, let's save it again. I'm going to save it in the right. Saved it in the wrong semester. Give me just 1 second. Save as. Let's put it in the right semester. All right. So I'm going to go back to my cabin elevation. Again, I'm going to type in XREF for XREF. Enter. I'm going to click on the DWG button, and I'm going to find that floor plan that I just created, or I just saved. 12B. There we go. And I'm going to hit open. Okay. And you're going to get a little menu that looks a little something like this. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the reference type as attachment. Okay. Attachment, you have a few extra capabilities as just an overlay would have. An overlay is just literally a reference. You can't modify it whatsoever. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as an attachment. Scale, I want it to come in 1:1. Okay, so I'm not going to check specify on screen. I want it to be full size just as I drew it in my other file. And my insertion point, I do want to specify on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just leave everything as is, and I'm going to hit OK. All right, and I'm going to just place this on my screen. I'm going to close down the XREF manager, and I'm going to zoom out. Okay, and here's that floor plan. Notice that when I click on it now, okay, notice when I click on it now, it's basically a big block. Okay, I can't make any modifications to it at all. Okay, besides just clicking on it. But you'll notice that if I type in layer, all right, I now have some newly added layers to my layers. Okay, it says cabin floor plan, and then next to that, if you keep looking, you'll see all of the layers that we created in that floor plan. So even though it's a reference, I can still go through and turn off those layers if I want to. All right, the only thing I can't do is modify that file. So what works nice with this is that I can place this floor plan in here, and let's say tomorrow I was to make some changes to my floor plan. Okay, I'm just going to type in PL. Okay, if you look right here on the screen, let's say we just made this. Let's say we made this room a little bit bigger. Okay, we did this tomorrow. We made this room a little bit bigger, I saved it, file save, and then tomorrow, right here, notice at the very bottom it says external file reference has changed. It's telling you that this file that you currently have referenced on your drawing, it's been modified. So if I click on that little link, notice that there's that little extra detail that I just added. Okay, I don't actually need that, so I'm going to delete it, but I just want to show you guys how that actually works. All right, so no matter what I do, that will always be up to date. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start drawing our first elevation here. All right, and just kind of as a reference, this is about what it's going to look like, or this is exactly what it's going to look like. Okay, I'll probably maybe draw it a little bit different today. All right, but this is going to be kind of our end goal. I'm going to draw 2 elevations with you. I'll draw these first 2, and then I'll let you guys loose, and you can start working on your own. Okay. So the next tool, or the way that we're basically essentially going to draw this is we're going to use a bunch of different reference lines to draw a mirrored image of this face. So this is going to be the time where you're going to need to start thinking about your cabin in 3 dimensions. Okay, we know what it looks like in plan. We understand how it works spatially, but how does it start to look in 3 dimensions? Okay, where are your windows located? What are the heights of them? Are they floor to ceiling windows, or are they your typical window that's at about where your windowsill is about 3 feet? Probably what a majority of us have in our houses today. Okay, so you have to start thinking about those different things. What are the different materials? Okay, is your building made of concrete? Is it made of steel? Is it all glass? Does it have wood siding? So you have to start to think about all of those things. All right, so I'm going to first start by drawing a elevation of this side. Okay, and as you start to draw all of the different sides, what you're going to want to do is take this reference here, and I'm going to do CO for copy, and I'm going to copy 4 different instances of this elevation over. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate each one so that I have a different side of my building on each, basically at the bottom here. Okay, so right now these are all the same. I'm going to rotate each one of these 90 degrees. Okay, there's one right there. Okay, so that's one side. I'm going to rotate this one 180. Okay. Let's rotate this one 270. Oops. There we go. All right, so you want to make sure that you have basically one side of the building on each one of these, okay? So that each side is facing the bottom, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to work off of each of these floor plans to create the elevations, okay? So the next thing that we need to do before we start drawing these is we need to set up a system of layers that we can use so that when we plot them using the pen styles that we learned we created last class, so that we actually have some variation in the depths of our elevations. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to type in layer, and we're going to create some new layers for this file. Okay, if you go to Canvas and you go to, let's see, exercise 23, you'll notice that I've given you what all of those layers should be called. Okay, it says closest and largest line is going to be magenta, okay, 0.80. All right, you've already created the pen styles for all of this, so you won't need to punch in all of this data. Okay, that magenta line will be your ground plane. Okay, you're not going to want that magenta line anywhere on your building. All right, and then the next largest line is going to be blue, cyan, yellow, red, and gray. So blue being the closest elements to you in the outer perimeter of your building, and gray being things like hatching. Okay, red being your finer details like window mullions and things that are really close. So if you have like a window mullion that's only 2 inches wide, you're not going to want a blue line, because that blue line is going to plot really thick and it's not going to read as 2 lines. Okay, so I'll go ahead and continue to go through these different items with you as we continue to draw these elevations. But let's go ahead and create these. I'm going to click on new layer, and let's just call this elevation magenta. All right, let's go ahead and create one of these for each. Elevation blue. I'll change the colors in a second. Elevation cyan. Just make sure I got these in the right order. So yellow, red, and then gray. All right, so 3 more. Elevation yellow. Elevation red, and then we'll do gray. Okay, so let's change all the colors real quick. So magenta, I'm going to change this color to 6 magenta. Gray, I'm going to change that to 9 gray. Okay, red, we'll use that as 1. Yellow, yellow, cyan, cyan, and finally blue. Okay, so that was pretty easy. Only took about a minute or so. Okay, so we're going to create our 6 layers. All right, we're going to use all of these layers to draw our actual building elevations. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a ground plane. All right, for now we're not going to worry about the topography. I will show you how to adapt the topography to your building elevation next class. Okay, so I'm going to change my layer to magenta. Okay, and I'm going to draw just a straight line on the bottom, just like so. Okay, that line will represent the ground plane for all of my elevations. All right, actually let's add one more layer, and that's going to be I'm going to call this ray lines. Okay, or you could put reference lines. Okay, either will work fine. So ray lines or reference lines, and I'm going to make these red. Okay, and I'm also going to make this a non-printing layer. So if by chance you leave them on or something like that, they won't print. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck or just click on the little printer. Okay, so that you see that little red circle. All right, so that ray lines or reference lines layer that you're creating will now be a non-printing layer. All right, so we'll close this down, and I'm going to go ahead and change my layers to the ray lines layer. Okay, and then from here, I'm going to go ahead and type in ray. All right, ray, and notice that when I select a point in my elevation, and I go ahead and just point in the direction that I want that ray line to go, notice that it's just an infinite line. Okay, that's all it is an infinite line in a certain direction. Okay, and what that line is telling me is it's telling me that's going to be where the edge of my building is. I'm basically drawing the perimeters of where all these different locations are going to be. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to want to draw a ray line. All right, and remember that after you do it one time, you can just hit the space bar and it will repeat that command. Okay, so I'm going to draw a line at wherever there will be a vertical object in my elevation. Okay, see how I'm doing that? So I'm just hitting spacebar to repeat that command, and I'm basically just drawing the line or pointing the line in the direction that I want for all the different objects in my floor plan that I know are going to be running in the vertical direction. Okay? All right, we're getting somewhere here, and this is going to be my patio. We have a railing. Okay, we have our steps, another railing. Bear with me for a sec as this takes a couple seconds. But this nice organization will allow for a really seamless and easy way to start to draw that elevation. So we'll also draw our door like so. Okay, so notice that we have all of these lines here. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start to block out. I'm just going to draw the rough locations of all of the different planes in my elevation. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to draw is I'm going to draw this first and closest part of my building. Okay, actually I take that back. Let's start at the actual closest thing and let's draw our steps. Okay, so my steps, I'm going to go ahead, because it's a close item in my elevation, I'm going to change it to a different layer. All right, I'm not going to do blue. I'm going to reserve blue for the my actual building, but I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to do cyan. That's going to be the next boldest line. Okay, so I'm going to go down here to my ground plane line and just make sure I kind of realize where the outer edges of my steps are going to be. Okay, so it's this line and this line, and I could start to draw this in the vertical dimension. Okay, so I'm going to type in PL for polyline, and I'm going to start to draw this first step. For those of you that don't know, steps are typically in plan. The tread is 11 inches, and the height of a step in elevation is going to be 7 inches. Okay, that's going to be the code standard for a step. Okay, so starting over here on the outer boundary of the step, I'm going to go ahead and let's actually change our units first to architectural. Okay, so I'm going to type in PL for polyline, and I'm going to draw the first step. Okay, so it's going to be 7 inches tall. All right, I'm going to go to the outer edge of where I know my steps are and go down. That's my first step. Okay, and if I look up, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. So I can go ahead and copy this up 5 times. So that's 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps, and 5 steps. Okay, so the next closest thing is going to be my actual porch or my patio. That's going to be the elevation that my actual ground floor of my cabin is sitting at, because this elevation wants to be the same elevation as what you walk into. All right, so I'm going to draw I'm going to use the same layer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and draw, it looks like a line from this point over to this point over here. Okay, so I'm going to start right here, go all the way over, and go down. And that's going to represent basically the outer edge of my steps. Okay, everyone see how does everyone see how the ray lines are correlating to basically creating the elevation? Okay, so we're using those ray lines to set up boundaries, and we're using them as reference lines to understand how it relates to the floor plan. All right, so now I can go ahead and start to draw my different elements in my elevation. So I'm going to go back to my blue line, elevation blue, and I'm going to draw this first portion of my building. So as you start to draw that first portion of your building, think about what it's actually going to look like. How tall are the walls? How tall? Where is the roof going to be? Okay. If I look at the elevation that I drew last time, I actually drew it in magenta. But you can see here basically that I have a magenta line with the roof that represents the closest part. Okay. I have a blue line that represents the next closest part, and then I have a yellow line that represents the furthest away portion of my elevation. Okay, so that's 1, 2, and then 3 way back here. Okay, so I'll actually use magenta. Why not? That's fine. I think it actually ended up plotting pretty nicely. So I'll use that magenta line to draw the first portion of my space. So again, I'm going to use PL for polyline. All right, and I'm going to say that up to my roof, I'm going to say that's 10 feet. Okay, I'm just kind of throwing out a number. I know my door is about 7 feet tall, and we're going to leave a little bit extra room on top. So I'm going to say 10 feet. Okay, that goes up to this point. All right, actually, let's make it a little taller. This is kind of a focal point of this cabin. Let's say it's 12 feet. So I'm going to say 12 feet, and I'm going to go over, catch this outer edge. This outer edge represents the edge of our building, as you can see here, and then I will go down. Okay, so that's one part. All right, so the next we have, I'll use a blue line to draw the outer extents of the next portion of my house. I'm going to say that this line is, or this roof portion is a little bit lower than the first part, so maybe I go down 3 feet. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and draw a line over to this line right here and go down. Okay, so that's going to represent the next portion of the next segment of my building. Okay, and I'm going to go down even another color, and I'm actually going to go down 2 colors because I'm actually stepping back quite a bit here. So I'm going to go from blue over to, let's say, yellow. Okay. And this is also going to be a little bit higher than that middle segment. I'm going to come over and come down. Okay? And if I go up to my layers, I'm going to turn off the ray lines just for a second so you can kind of see how this is starting to block out. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the ray lines. And you can see here how I'm starting to establish those different planes of that elevations, or of that elevation, okay? And then once you get these 3 different planes going, you can start to add the other details, okay? Things like your windows, things like your roof, okay? And then you can start to do the same thing all the way around your building, okay? I'm not gonna get into an incredible amount of detail, all right, but I'm gonna turn back on those ray lines so that I can see them. And I'll start to draw some of the different elements. Okay, so these lines right here represent my door. So I'm going to pick a little bit thinner of a line other than magenta. We'll say cyan for my door. Again, PL for polyline. I'm going to go up 7 feet. Like so. Okay, and that's going to be my door. All right, I could do an offset. We'll say 2 inches. That could be my door frame. All right, or I could do that actually in like that. Okay, so that's going to be my door frame. I'm going to draw another line here for the center of my door. Okay, and that'll be good for now. I can go through and add more detail to that door. Maybe you want a nice little glass panel in there. You could easily do that. Okay, so I'm going to trace this like that with my polyline. Again, I'm going to offset maybe something like 8 inches, and that becomes, you know, the glass portion of my window. Okay, this might all seem a little foreign to you right now. That's okay, not a big deal. I'll help you along with this as we continue to move forward. Okay, so there's my double door. Okay, I'm going to continue to add some other details, maybe like my roof. Okay, I'm going to change this back to cyan. All right, and I'm going to say my roof wants to overhang 2 feet. Maybe that roof is 1 foot thick. Okay, and there's my roof. Okay, maybe you want to do something a little different. Maybe it wants a slope. All right, so start to think about those different things. Okay, so any questions about that at all? Okay, does that make sense? If you have questions, speak up now. All right, so I am going to do one more of these. Okay, I'm just going to kind of block out this floor plan right here. Okay, and then as you guys start working, I'll continue to add some of the little bit more finer details, and you can continue to reference the screen on how I do that. Okay, you can see here that I've given myself ray lines that represent all of my window mullions, so you could start to create some of these different elements. Okay, so all of those ray lines would translate to details like this. Okay, those ray lines would come down, and I could start to add these different elements. Okay, everyone see that? In fact, I could just copy this over. You won't be able to do this, but I'll just show you how that actually translates. All right, so I'm going to select all these different pieces. All right, I'm going to copy that, bring it over to my elevation here, and I am going to use my utilities, my clipboard, and I'm going to paste it as a block. So it comes in as one object. All right, I'm going to change the layer of this to a finer color, maybe like red. Oh, of course, it's still not red. Let's do this. Let's change the layer of it before I paste it as a block. Elevation red. And let's go ahead and clipboard paste as block. Of course. All right, so I'm going to move this over. All right, I'm going to move this over to this location. Notice that all those ray lines line up with those mullions, okay? Notice that this ray line right here lines up with that kind of outer post of this window segment. Okay, I'm going to bring that down to the ground so that it's kind of a nice floor to almost ceiling glazing. Okay, I could do the same thing. I would draw the same kind of detail for this area over here. Okay? my end goal being something that looks like this. That's about all the detail that I'm really expecting from everyone here. Okay, I've basically drawn the outer perimeters of each of the of the areas. Okay, magenta, blue, and yellow. I've drawn my windows, window frames, little details like my steps and my railings. Okay, and that's about it. I've also added a hatching for these different items. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just jump into this elevation. We'll pretend that this is where we are. Okay, I'll do one more step and I'm going to add that hatching. All right, so I'm going to change my layer to elevation gray. All right, because I want that to be my finest layer on my elevation. I'm going to type in hatch. All right, and I could start to pick the bodies of these different areas. Okay, so notice that we now have a hatching on the face all around the windows. That looks good, and I'm going to hit enter. All right, from there I can select that hatching and I can start to adjust the different properties so that we can get what we want. Okay, so I change the scale, I change the angle. Okay, so that might be like a vertical wood siding. If I want it to be the other way, I would say minus 45. All right, and there would be a horizontal wood siding. Okay, so you can see here that I now have two elevations, and each of these elevations, excuse me, would correlate to what we did here for our floor plan. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that in here so that you can see how that relates. Okay, everybody see that? So same thing over here. Notice that if I was to place a couple ray lines, let me just line this one up first. It's not currently lined up. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and turn on my ray layer. I'll draw a couple more ray lines so you guys can see how that translates and how that relates. So ray, R-A-Y. Okay, see how that relates there? These lines represent the outer edges of that plane of the building. Okay, and I'm going to draw one for each of the different planes. Okay, so we'll go ahead and call that for good for now. It's 7:20. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll see you guys at 7:30. I will leave this on the screen, but your goal today should be obviously finish as much as you can for your elevations. Hopefully everyone has their floor plans pretty dialed in, okay? If you still need to work on your floor plans or you're still adding like the really fine details, maybe pause on that for now. The critical thing is going to be that you have a complete building footprint. If you have the complete building footprint, you know where all your windows are, you can start drawing all your elevations, okay? So that you can turn in the elevations on Monday, and then you can spend Monday and Tuesday refining the floor plans and adding all the finer details for the elevations. Okay, any questions? Good?
What keyboard command do you do to duplicate the ray line?
It's going to be the space bar. So space bar will always just repeat the last command that you just did. Okay, so if I type in RAY for ray and I draw a ray line, okay, I hit escape and then I hit the space bar again, it will just repeat that same command. Okay? All right, so go ahead and get started. We have about hour and 40 minutes, a little bit more than an hour, 40 minutes. Okay, take a quick 10-minute break, and then we're going to spend the rest of the class working on these elevations. And I'll come by and I'll help everyone, at least try to chat with everyone for 5 or 10 minutes, so we can have a really nice cabin. The other teacher's always a little jealous of my cabins because I always put a lot of time into them. I get into some of the technical details a little bit, and I'll definitely make Brian fix all of them because I'm going to challenge him because he decided to put his cabin in a tree. So he's just asking for it. All right, so go ahead and take a break. We'll see you guys in a few minutes.